Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Navi, and welcome to everyone to our weekly Tech and Learning Roundtable. A special thanks to Securely for making today's webinar possible. We are sincerely grateful they recognize the significance of keeping our educator family together, especially during this incredible time in our history. These events are part of a series of offerings from Tech and Learning each Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern Time. So make sure you pay attention to the Tech and Learning website to know what the topic is for our next webinar. We're really enjoying highlighting the work districts are doing that influence their entire region and keeping the conversation going on social media. And speaking of social media, we're also having a live Twitter chat right now at #TLTechLive. So be sure to check out Twitter while you're also on this webinar. COVID has changed the way we are thinking of schooling our children. The shutdown of public schools in the spring and the continuation of COVID spikes across the country and really across the world has led districts to completely reimagine the way school is and will be opening in the fall. Boards of education, superintendents, district leaders are each trying to assess what needs to be the procedure for the opening of school. And amid all of the crisis and chaos we are seeing in our world today, cyber criminals are rearing their ugly heads and taking advantage of the situation at scale. And the number of ransomware and DDoS attacks increases daily. And our kids are more exposed to online environments than, quite frankly, ever before. So today, we're talking with district leaders about security issues related to online learning as schools plan for next year, such as keeping data private, cybersecurity concerns, monitoring online activity to make sure students are safe, and content is appropriate. Our presenters today include Mark Elliott. He's the Chief Information Officer from Olympia School District in Washington. Chantel Monahan, the Director of Technology, MSD for Steuben County in Indiana. Anders Johnson, he's the Senior Vice President of Global Sales and the co-founder of Charlotte Operations Securely. And Jarrett Volser, who's the General Manager, MDM and Classroom Technologies, Securely. So we have a phenomenal panel lined up for you. And before we get started, let's just take a read on what you're doing to start school this year. So we have a quick poll that we want you to do. And while you're answering that poll, let me remind you that we want this to be an interactive opportunity. So there's a Q&A portion window at the bottom of your screen for you to submit your questions along the way, both our industry and academic thought partners. And we'll integrate your questions along the way, and then we'll have a little period at the end of our conversation. So hopefully that's giving you plenty of time. Let's see what your results are. Oops. Okay. I'm not able to read the results, but I'm wondering if we have a number of people that are going full remote or full face-to-face. One of the districts that we're going to be hearing from today is full remote, and the other district is anticipating full face-to-face. So that's going to be really exciting to see and to hear about today. So let's move on to see and hear what our wonderful panelists have to say. I can't even imagine starting school today. I was an assistant superintendent for many years and started 10 whole seasons of school years. And I can't imagine being in that seat today and thinking through all of the constant changes and requirements that are put upon you by health departments, mayors, state governments, and just the increasingly changing landscape. And speaking of managing changing landscapes, complements of COVID, our first topic is going to be managing at scale. We have 4 speakers, our panelists, to share their insights related to lessons learned from the spring and what fall might look like at scale. We're going to start our conversation with Anders from Securely, who has a bird's eye view of many districts' perspectives. And then we're going to hear from our 2 district leaders, Mark and Chantel, as they share the inside viewpoint of scaling plans to attend to the safety of staff and learners. And finally, Jarrett is going to share his viewpoint on supporting teachers through this incredible landscape. So Anders, can you get us started with your bird's eye view?
Absolutely, Kecia. Thank you so much. So I want to cover a couple major things, observations that I've seen. I've actually been working with school districts now for about 20 years and keeping kids safe online on the devices that they're using. And back in 2009 already, schools are starting one-to-one initiatives, of course, sending devices home. And a big part of that was, how do I make sure that these devices are protected when they're not in my building? But still, even now, 11 years later, a lot of schools are still not there yet, meaning they're not sending all the devices home, and or they may not even be filtering the devices when they go home. And of course, during this pandemic now, I've been talking to a lot of districts. They're having to hurry very quickly to acquire and buy lots of different devices and send them home, and whether it be hybrid learning or sending them home, all the devices going home, and figure out, how do I keep them safe, right? How do I filter them? And so filtering, even after 20 years of being around for schools, is still a very complex solution to get to work. I would not have expected that, but a lot of changes are happening, and sending devices home, I see a lot of schools are stuck with multiple platforms, multiple browsers. They may have some grade levels that are taking an iPad home, another set of grades are taking a MacBook or a Chromebook home. And so some of the things that I've seen that are really critical to take a look at is, can my filtering solution support multiple browsers, multiple devices when they go home? A lot of schools may struggle with iPads, and maybe the Chromebooks are working okay. And so I've seen a lot of districts already have to struggle using multiple different solutions to filter. How easy is the deployment going to be? Some districts, are given just days or weeks to get things up and running by the superintendent, and so there's a lot of stress going on to try to get them all working. Authentication is a big issue. How do I make sure that I know which children are being filtered, and how can I pull reports for what they're doing when they're not at school? A lot of schools are going to Google, G Suite, or Office 365 and full Azure Microsoft Cloud. Do the filter solutions work with those platforms, and how well do they work with the different platforms as they go home to authenticate the students? Students go into Starbucks or McDonald's and getting on captive portals and get Wi-Fi access, doing homework somewhere else instead of in the home living room. Those provide technical issues. Secure websites, and how do I decrypt those? A lot of vendors handle those differently, but ultimately what I'm seeing a lot of schools wanting is they just want it to be simple. Right? I have a lot going on. I have to send all these devices home. They want it to deploy correctly. And I've seen older solutions also force traffic back to the school, where there could be an appliance sitting there. And that typically will make the school the internet service provider after hours. And so that doesn't typically scale very well. And so to have true scalability, I recommend looking into all of these different aspects to make sure that you have easy deployment, authentication, that you can handle multiple different browsers and platforms, and that scalability in reporting is there as well. So obviously, having been at Securely now for 6 years, we've really researched carefully and innovated in a lot of ways to make sure all of these different pieces and parts work together very well. And so, of course, that's why I'm still at Securely, right? It's really nice to support the schools in this front. But another piece that I wanted to cover, which is really where my passion is and what led me to Securely years ago, is looking at parental integration. Most school districts, even today, and I think this has been in the case for decades now, the reporting and the health and safety online for the students has been with the IT department at the school. Maybe sometimes the principals and building administrators as well have some access to reports, but the parents have no visibility. So when these devices are going home, and now during a distance learning environment where they're home even more during the day, what's important to know is these kids our students are using the internet differently than what they used to, right? They're not just trying to get to game sites and pornography. They are very social. They're very active online. They're venting emotions. They're bullying each other. They're sharing documents, images. And so a lot of what the kids are doing to keep them safe goes beyond just having an IT department have access to these reports. So it's securely, we believed early on that involving parents was going to be a huge part of it. And that's what we've done. Over the last 4 years, we have been giving parents an app that they can use to see what their kids are doing at home on the school device. What are they searching for? What are they doing on social media? What kind of videos are they watching? What are they learning throughout the day? And it's been what I call a massive game changer. In fact, we've had a tremendous amount of customers turn this on during the COVID-19 phase now, because they understand that truly partnering with parents is going to be really what will help you scale, right? It's very difficult to put what a kid is doing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and put all of that responsibility of their health and safety and productivity online with just school staff. So empowering parents now, we've been seeing 25 to 40% engagement. Parents love it. We have over 3 million parents right now that are actively weekly logging in to see what their kids are doing. And the feedback has been incredible. Parents are able to have conversations with their kids. They're able to catch their kids when they're searching for things or depressed about something. And they're able to help manage screen time, control filter policies at home, and just be more actively involved in what happens on that Chromebook, what happens on that iPad at 10 o'clock at night, right? Does internet shut down? Do I want to block an additional website I don't agree with? And so the feedback we've been getting from parents via the schools is thank you for this transparency. And so I think during the full distance learning environment, partnering with your parents and empowering your parents to have some type of visibility and even control over these devices and the online experience, I think is proven to be massive for the schools that we're working with. So I'll pass that back.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's incredible information and very valuable. And I couldn't agree with you more on your last sentiment with the parent perspective. So now let's turn to our districts, Mark and Chantel. And we're going to start with Mark. So Mark, can you tell us what's going on in Olympia? And then we're going to have Chantel just kind of come, when you finish, you can just turn it right over to Chantel, and she's going to share what she's doing in Steuben County.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. The Olympia School District in the state of Washington has made the move to 100% remote learning to start this school year. In fact, our entire county has made that decision, as have a couple of other counties in the state of Washington. So we've been working together with very large groups of teachers, administrators, community members to lay out how our remote learning will be looking in the fall. And a lot of that is predicated upon the fact that our district is already one-to-one in grades 6 through 12. And over the course of last spring and the summer, this year we were planning to be one-to-one cart-based in our elementary schools. We're moving them to a full take-home model as well. And a couple of nice things about that: we're a Chromebook district. Authentication is easy, and with Securely, we are cloud filtering everything. So there is the ease of mind that it's not overwhelming our bandwidth pipe. For our school district, for those purposes, if we were going to remote filter ourselves. Plus, we use the 24 service for monitoring for health and safety. So that's in place, and we've been pushing that out to parents for over a year now. So that really is just a huge load off of our minds. As far as another piece that I think a lot of districts are trying to handle at the same time as tackling how to make a shift to either remote or hybrid learning, something that teachers who aren't trained in that aren't necessarily comfortable with, and just not having to stack another item on top of that in our district is a big relief for me. Chantel?
Thanks, Mark. And yeah, thank you again for having us today to share our experiences. I am in Steuben County in Angola, Indiana. So I'm up in the corner almost to Michigan and almost to Ohio. Small district, about 2,700 students. And we are planning on opening face-to-face next week. We have surveyed our parents, and the response was overwhelmingly that they wanted their students to come back to school if at all possible. And so we are trying to make that a reality for our families. We do, though, have a percentage of our families who don't feel comfortable coming back to school. So for those students, we are offering a 100% virtual option taught by our classroom teachers. So it will be a bit of a hybrid with the majority of our students in our classrooms starting next week. And for us, we've positioned ourselves pretty well, as well as we could, for this transition. We've been a one-to-one Chromebook district for 4 years now. We have also been doing kind of 1, 2, or 3 off days of distance learning for inclement weather days. Here in the Midwest, we get some snowstorms. So we've been practicing kind of a blended learning model the last few years, doing a lot of teacher training, but this year's going to present some different issues with the majority of our students being here in the classroom, but then some being at home. As Mark suggested, it's an easy thing for our district to have the cloud filtering in place. Whether a student is here in the classroom or whether a student is at home, they're going to receive that same filtering. A teacher is not going to have to worry about a lag as people connect and come back to the district for the filtering. We're not going to overwhelm the network here. Everyone is going to have hopefully the same seamless experience, whether they're here or there. And the parent portal piece we rolled out about 2 years ago now. And that's been huge for our parents during distance learning, that they get some insight. We maybe have parents who are working during the day. Maybe they were essential workers last spring, and their students are at home with a babysitter or they're at childcare, but all of a sudden they have that device with them 24/7, and they're supposed to be working on their distance learning. Well, with the parent portal, parents can see exactly what the student's been doing that day, and if they've been maybe on some different sites instead of what they were supposed to be doing, and having those conversations, giving parents that tool to help manage that distance learning piece, no matter what it looks like.
Excellent. Well, I mean, you each have such incredible stories about the lift you have to endure during this time and the rapid changes that you're having to respond to almost every day. And I just can't even imagine, as I said earlier, how challenging it is to plan during this time. You know, there's a lot of people in the audience who are in the same circumstance. So I want you to know, if you're listening, don't forget to submit your questions along the way. You know, we always do better together. And so submit any questions you might have. If you have a plan, submit questions about what you're doing. And if you don't have a plan, ask our 2 panelists or 4 panelists what they might recommend. So our final speaker on this topic is Jarrett, and Jarrett is going to enlighten us on what can be done to support teachers during this crazy time in our world of education. Jarrett?
Thank you, Kecia. So I wanted to talk a little bit about classroom management as the way to support teachers during remote learning, including some feedback and what we learned through the spring when all of this started. Everybody kind of rushed home. We saw these remote classes starting. So to start, when we talk about classroom management, our product is a Securely Classroom, and there are similar products out there, but we're talking about the type of product where teachers can monitor what students are doing in a live fashion, what's going on their device right now. And so most classroom management focuses on monitoring. We also focus a lot on guiding student learning during that class. So it's more than just being able to see what the students are doing, but things like pushing resources out to them, perhaps focusing their attention on specific resources, as well as being able to communicate with students during the class, perhaps during a quiet time or when something's going on, when the teacher wants to communicate directly with the student. So this is kind of the traditional view, or where we came from, and what our products have been used for several years for. And as a product manager, I'm always looking for new ways that teachers are using the product. And of course, this is what changed a lot when we went to the remote learning environment. There was actually even a question whether our product would be used, classroom products, would there be a strong place for that with remote learning? And surprisingly, we instantly saw both increase in the use of a classroom product, as well as an increase in the activity or the engagement and what teachers were doing in the product. Surprisingly, even the class sessions that we're running ran for longer periods of time. And I'll explain why that, why would that work out in remote learning? So I'll talk about that in just a moment. And also a shift in the focus of the types of functionality that teachers are looking for to help them manage that classroom. So for us as a vendor, we had to gather that feedback. And of course, we have insight into the product to find out what's being used, but we also held a number of teacher roundtable discussions to say, what happened when you went remote? We see that you're using the product. How are you using it? How did the shift and how did those things change? To see how those behaviors in terms of what the teachers were found most useful. And then also the ability for us to update the product to match those needs. And that's an ongoing process as we get that sort of feedback. So we instantly saw kind of the split between the two types of remote classes we're teaching. And traditionally, when we thought of classroom management in school, of course, we're always talking about synchronous live sessions with the class in front of the teacher the entire time. So the first question was, does this work in a remote environment? And the answer is yes. We do see synchronous classes. We do see the situations where the class is meeting, the teacher is using WebEx or Meet or Zoom, and they're meeting with that live class during a live session all together at the same time. And they still have the need for some similar tools, but the shift in how the tool was used has focused more from control and management and keeping students on task to more watching what students are doing to be able to be prepared to help. So classroom management still has a role in that section, in that area. Where we saw the increase or the rise is in realizing that the product in classroom management can also be useful for asynchronous learning. And that is by providing a tool so that teachers can be kind of on call. Some of them call it office hours. Some are just leaving class sessions run for long periods of time as students drop in and out throughout the day, doing their work and being able to use a tool to continue to help the students even in that. So where we saw the shift from was with the traditional classroom. It was much more about keeping students on task, kind of lockdown. You freeze the screens, I want to get an announcement out, or lock them into a website, we're doing Quizlet or taking a quiz and I don't want them browsing elsewhere. That was a little bit more of the focus with traditional in-person classrooms. Where we saw the shift with the remote classes is a total shift to communications. It totally became now about finding out when students are coming online, when are they doing their work? Can I see if they're going into my Google Classroom and are they stuck somewhere? Do they need help? And then can I communicate and get messages to them in chat? The communications really became the key here. And I had one teacher, a story that I love is a teacher described what they love about a classroom management style communication through a product like this. They said that I send emails to my students and they don't always get their emails. I try to get them through Google Classroom, and later they say, oh, I didn't have my notifications turned on. Just all these challenges and something as simple, you would think, in today's world with all these ways to communicate that didn't always work real well. But a tool that let the teacher say, you know what, I can see when my student's online. I can pop something on their screen at that moment that they can't ignore, that they have to reply to, was really a powerful tool for them, and for them, one of the most useful things of having classroom management tool available during when they're teaching. And both of these sets of features work well together. So for a teacher that meets maybe once a day or once a week, however often with their class for the live session, they can do more of that pushing of resources and group management. But then the ability to see when students come online and need help, student being able to raise their hand or engage the teacher in a chat, or the teacher reaching out to the student to chat, really became more focused with the and so being able to adjust to that is something that I'm kind of proud to be a part of, was Securely, to be able to give the resources to be able to respond very quickly as we get this kind of feedback from teachers saying it would be great during remote teaching if we could do this or we could do that, or we need alerts to know when a student comes online, or we need audible alerts because we're doing other work. The student needs our help. We need sounds. These are all the kinds of feedback that we gathered through the spring and that continue. And then we want to, of course, keep the door open to get that kind of feedback and keep enhancing the product to work in both environments, and of course in the blended environment where both types of features, both communication and the pushing of resources.
You know, Jarrett, you mentioned some really great pieces around the challenges of communicating in this online world in this different way, and the need to have kind of additional securities around that communication. And we've certainly seen that with some apps having kind of predators come into the space. So those are all excellent things to bring to everyone's attention. You know, we're going to transition to our next topic, which is really focused on the social emotional well-being of our students and faculties. And, you know, the things that Jarrett just spoke of are really helpful to ease the mind of teachers, right? Sometimes it's challenging to be so exposed, and having those kinds of tools are comforting to teachers. And there's some other ways that we can comfort our students during this time. So we're going to do another quick poll, but instead of using the polling feature, I want to ask everyone to just kind of put their responses in the Q&A. I'm getting you geared up to know where that Q&A box is, so you can put your questions in there too for our panelists. So tell us how you might be managing the safety alerts in the upcoming year. You've got all these different dynamics of being face-to-face, being online. So how are you thinking about, or are you thinking about managing safety alerts in the upcoming year? So just put your response in the Q&A box, and along with your response, if you want to throw in a question, that would be amazing. And I'm going to take a look at those, and you can keep putting those in, by the way, as we start this conversation. Then we'll kind of recap them at the end of the conversation. So I think we're all in agreement that social emotional learning and social emotional well-being is essential during this time. Kids are going through a wide variety of emotional kind of up and downs, especially as they're returning to school. And as Chantel said, you know, they're coming back face to face, but that is not going to be the same experience as it was last fall when they came back to school. So there's a lot of change in the world, and especially in their classrooms. So this conversation is going to start again with Anders and the bird's eye view, and then we're going to hear from districts as they kind of respond and reflect on the insights that Anders shares with us. So Anders, what are you seeing nationally related to this topic?
Yeah, no, thank you. And this is, you know, given a little background, I think that when schools have been looking at how do I keep my kids safe online, it's always been about block as much pornography as possible, make sure they don't get on any other gambling or game sites and so forth. And it's become just a big cat and mouse game over the years of how do I find a better web filter. And then, of course, we started transitioning into social emotional learning and digital citizenship, which are two terms that for years we didn't talk about. And now it comes up, you know, every time I talk to a school district. And so I think we've all realized now that even pre-COVID and pre-distance learning, the kids are not using the web the way that they used to. They have a device now that they many times take home, or they have it out of a cart at the school. And so when they're sitting at home on that device, they're going to normally use the device that has the biggest screen, that's the least or the most accessible. And as much good that they're doing with this device to learn, they're also using the web for very many bad things. And, you know, we particularly see that here at Securely. Not just the bullying, you know, you're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. There's a lot of really nasty bullying going on inside Google Docs or Office 365 data. We see kids that are sharing pornographic images with each other, writing suicide notes and, you know, white font, you know, sending emails to each other that are very nasty. Or many times venting their emotions. And a lot of schools are concerned right now with kids that are home and they've been in lockdown for many months. They haven't had the social interaction that they're used to. There's more abuse going on in homes. We hear there's just more and more concern about kids' mental stability and emotional well-being is coming. And a lot of that falls in the districts. They want to do something about it, right? And so thankfully, there's technology out there that can help schools be proactive. Now, one of the things that Securely does is, and I think this is really important, is looking not only at keywords and phrases to try to be proactive to find out what kids are doing, but actually looking at the sentiment of what kids are doing, because the way that they are communicating to each other changes, and it's very different. So we've developed an AI that will look for the emotional sentiment behind what a kid is typing up. So when a student types something to the effect of, I don't know how much longer I can handle this, it would be a negative thing, but there's no obvious keywords and phrases. So I think it's very important to look at deeply, really, what kids are typing and doing on the web amongst each other, to identify kids that are depressed and suicidal and are bullying somebody else, but also look at the context. You have a lot of kids that are searching for things, and when they're on Google, we always say they never lie to Google, right? When they're on the search engine and they want to know how to painlessly kill themselves, that they're searching for that, and if they don't search for that, they're not get the answer that they want. So, we look at what are kids searching for. That tells us a lot. What are they experiencing on social media, but also what are they doing inside their Google documents or their cloud environment that the school is providing, and looking at that holistically and looking at the context, and then having a length of reporting that will also show you a child progressing through a stage of grief or a stage of being bullied, I think is something we've also seen, where a child may be searching for something 3 months ago, and now it's escalating, and we want to keep tabs on that, right? So we can monitor things. So now you've got a solution that is looking at all this data, which is huge, right? We're looking at more what the kids are doing to keep them safe. Now what? And I think what a lot of schools that I talk to almost daily tell me is, Anders, this is great. It's great that we have this data, but we don't really have a process that tells us that makes us feel comfortable that we know that our staff are going to know what to do. And I see a lot of schools are still struggling with that right now, a tremendous amount, actually. So what do you do when you get all these alerts when kids are searching for things or being bullied and so forth? And our solution to that was to have a team that works 24 hours a day that will take that load off of you, that'll certainly give the notices to the principals and so forth if you want, but that will have staff that monitors kids for somebody that's suicidal and so forth. And a graph that I'm showing you here will show you just what we're seeing is about 75% of the data that we see is in web searches and traffic, and then about 25% is going to be inside a cloud environment where the documents and emails are stored. And so our 24-hour team will look for kids that are depressed and suicidal and at risk, and then call authorities, work with crisis teams, work with police departments, call your staff, let them know. And there's multiple companies that do that, but I think that a lot of schools have been hesitant to moving forward fully proactively to keep kids safe, even though that they know that there's a lot of data there, because they don't know how to handle it. So looking at a company that can help support you every hour of every day, I think makes more schools feel comfortable, and that's what I've seen. Real briefly, I just want to mention, we've already had 1,000 lives that we've saved in a little over 2.5 years, where we had a kid that had written a note and it was about to take their life. So just one vendor seeing those kinds of statistics, I think, to me, shows the urgency, especially now with more kids being at home and having a device, of what we could do together to keep kids safe.
Absolutely. And I think I'm predicting that those types of things might even increase in the upcoming year because of the situation and just the length of time that we've been in it. So, Mark, what are you seeing in your district, and what kind of precautions or protocols are you putting in play?
So before we implemented the 24 monitoring, we were doing it ourselves, and it was incredibly overwhelming. So much information comes through that we were constantly filtering and monitoring, and I think Anders kind of nailed it right on the head. It's not just any one thing. It was a combination of things that were flagging us to act on something that we were seeing coming through those alerts. And we positively know that we intervened on some self-harm situations that were really scary, to be honest. And it really got us to a point where, and I think we're going to talk about this in a bit, where we realized that we couldn't do this on our own. Even though we have, a medium-sized school district, I would say we have about 10,000 kids. We're not staffed to be watching an alert system like this 24/7. And so we made the decision to move to 24 so that Securely could assist us with this and alert us when we had serious threats. And then at that point in time, we could take action on those items. But we are seeing that, and we are talking about in our school district as we go through our planning meetings, that we're essentially talking about trauma-informed practices. A lot of our planning is centering around how we implement trauma-informed practices in the fall. When we go back to school, that we are acknowledging that regardless of what type of situation the student is in, they're going through some sort of trauma throughout this school closure and this pandemic. There's just no way that they're not, and their families are as well. So it's a big load off of us to not have to watch those filters constantly, knowing that Securely pretty much has our back on this, and we can focus on our content and our curriculum and how we're going to support the social emotional needs of our students and our families when we reopen. Anything else?
I think I know there's a delay in my mute button. I'm so sorry about that. No idea what's going on. But I think a lot of districts around the country are leaning into trauma-informed practices and thinking through how they can be proactive with that. I also think that, it's like you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of districts have not had this online component to the extent that we're going to be having it. And I think, there's probably going to be a lot of what Anders was talking about, students sharing information, they think in a way that they're getting it out, kind of maybe even a call for help. But if you don't have a way to monitor that, then you have no idea they're making a call for help. So I think there's just going to be a lot of new kind of frontiers, so to speak, out there for districts. And I think there's going to be a lot of unknowns that we're going to be encountering along the way. And it sounds like you've kind of had that in your past and you've learned from it, and you're a little bit more prepared than I think a lot of districts are going into this.
Well, so. I think Anders also was saying that Google never lies. The flip side of that of what we experienced, at least in our district, it's like the students are shouting into the void. That's where we picked up most of our alerts, is they would Google what they were feeling. They would Google and and I don't know if they were looking for camaraderie, support, what kind of answers came back. But that's actually a big portion of where we picked up our alerts, was just that students would Google their feelings. And Securely was a huge help, because we never really thought about that before. As educators, we typically think of Google as a place to go get resources.
Right.
So.
And I also think that families are a little bit challenged. The whole family is going through change right now, right? And I think they're a little bit challenged, and sometimes, supports that might have been there for the students in the past might be not absent, but a little distracted. And so they're going to lean into the internet probably more than they have in the past. And to have a tool that can do that kind of alerting for you is really awesome. Chantel, it's your turn. Share with us what you are seeing in your district, but also maybe what you might be anticipating for your district.
Sure. Yes, we are still managing all of the alerts that Securely gives us locally, and that's a concerted effort between guidance counselors, principals, technology staff, school resource officer. And as Mark said, it's overwhelming. It really is a full-time job. And I think especially what remote learning in the spring taught us is we can either pay a person full-time to do this, or we can pay a trusted company who's already doing this work to add that extra layer for us to make sure we keep our kids safe. We are seeing an increased amount of students who are reaching out for help, whether it's in emails to their friends, whether it's on a Google Doc, whether it's questions to Google or things they're searching for on YouTube. We are seeing that go up because our students had a clear break from whatever stability they were expecting school to be able to provide for them, however much or little support that was. And I think as we anticipate coming back to the classroom, I talking to several high school age kids here in the last few weeks, they've said, "Oh, Mrs. Manhan, I would wear a hazmat suit if that meant I could come back to school." They desperately do want to be back in the building, but I really do think that they're envisioning that it's going to be getting back to normal, getting back to the way things were. And perhaps the reality when they do return to us, that it's not going to be exactly the same, and it's not going to be the same environment they left in March. It might further cause that decline in kind of their mental health and what they're experiencing. On the plus side, I think I know in Indiana last year, our state adopted some social emotional learning standards across the state. And a lot of educators kind of saw that as kind of like one more thing to do. They're not taking anything away. They're giving us another thing to do. Or that's the touchy-feely, fluff piece. I have to teach these contents for the standardized test. Well, hopefully these experiences of the last few months are proving to all educators and all families that that is an essential piece of what we provide in education, and that we need to focus there so that learning can happen. I mean, we have to go back to Maslow, right? It's got to start by meeting those primal needs before we can actually engage in learning.
Yeah, I have a friend, Maria Scardo, you may know of her. She's the chief academic officer in Miami-Dade. And she says, Maslow over Bloom's, Maslow over Bloom's, because you really do need to focus on that hierarchy of needs versus the learning, because you can't have learning happen if there's still a need there. And I'm wondering, with the face-to-face kind of return, will there still be in your district a digital element to their learning? Are you thinking, even though we're bringing them back, one of the things my buddies in some other countries have already started, Denmark, Australia, have learned is you can't share materials because of the kind of, sharing of the virus, so to speak. So a lot of them have stayed with the digital elements, even though they're back face to face. And that still keeps them in an online environment where you have all these kind of security, extra security issues. So are you guys thinking about that, or what are you thinking about with that?
Yes. Absolutely. We know that returning face-to-face, there's the risk that someone is going to have a positive test. And ultimately, there are going to be people with symptoms who get tested, don't get tested, are asymptomatic. We're anticipating that attendance is going to be all over the place. You're going to have people who are self-quarantining because they may possibly have been exposed, people waiting on test results. That is going to be a reality. We've seen that already in schools that have opened up, that there have already been positive cases. So at some point, at least for some length of time, that's going to be a reality for at least a section of our students. And with only a small population of our students learning at home and the rest of them learning here in person, the only way that we could help our teachers, because we want to keep them all here and employed and all of our students in our district, we're telling our teachers they need to plan every day as if it could possibly be a virtual learning day, because we might be here today, but tomorrow there might be a confirmed positive case in your classroom, and you all might have to go to a remote option for 10 days. There's a possibility. So if we are establishing digital protocols from day one, how do we access this? Where do I go to find my materials? How do I communicate with my teacher? And then the face-to-face part is really a bonus. It's that extra extension. It's the chance to get that hands-on, at least on a small scale, even though we can't share materials. And then we've talked to our teachers about staying safe, using digital means instead of collecting a bunch of papers that all the students have touched that you're going to take home with yourself to grade. Have students take a picture of their work, and you have that digital version of maybe the hands-on work that they've done, and protect yourself too. So yeah, we definitely have digital at top of mind, and how can we take those great pieces that we were able to kind of tease out during March, April, and May, and make those positive pieces going forward.
Another thing that I've heard, I'm sorry, go ahead, Anders.
That was Mark.
Mark,
I just have a couple of points to throw in there, and I don't think that anybody has any doubt that what we're going through right now is going to change education permanently.
Yep.
There's no question. We have plenty of high-flying teachers that have moved forward with digital integration in their classrooms, whether they're blending their instruction or doing whatever, but this is going to change the face of education forever. And now that there is no choice but to move forward digitally for the teachers that haven't wanted to, a majority of those teachers are going to see some benefit to their practice in this, and they're going to continue those practices once this pandemic is over. No question. I mean, we could potentially see this change the way we schedule our schools. This could potentially change the way that we interact with families. It could drag us out of an institutionalized educational world into something totally different. And honestly, our school district is hoping for that. It's a large conversation that we've been having. And on the reality side, like the here and now side, our planning for our full remote is matching what we would see in a hybrid face-to-face, so that we actually have the ability to bounce between the two. We are lining up the way our students will meet with their teachers virtually, as well as it would be the same way that they would meet on some sort of AB schedule where they're on site 2 days a week and doing that. But school just can't look the same after this. I don't think that the way we're leveraging these digital tools is just going to change everything. And more importantly, for people in Chantel and my positions, are the foundations that we build these tools upon, right? So Securely is covering our security aspect of what we do for content filtering, how we're handling harm and bullying situations. And, if you're not standardizing on an LMS to make it easy for your parents, that's something that should be a conversation in your school district as well, because too many resources can be too confusing. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
I was going to say something that's been interesting for me as a vendor to see right on the other side of the curtain is, that school districts have been very quick to adopt major change over the years. And I think this is just one more time they're facing that. Some example I was thinking about is, there was a time when no school wanted to give a kid their own email address, right? Now they almost all do. Or giving a student their own device and sending it home, and now that's widely accepted. Or from what we've seen in Securely is having parents be involved. Years ago when we first started doing that, schools are very hesitant to doing it. During just the last 6 months now, we've had schools quickly adopt and launch into it, almost just jumping off the cliff. And figuring out if they have the parachute later. And so that's been exciting to see. And I think now with remote learning and incorporating more digital tools is just another major shift, right? And so to me, there's a lot of optimism from the vendor side to see whether the company I work for not, has those all the solutions for everything. That I do think that the schools are moving very quickly, and it's exciting to see. But I think they've already gone through major shifts over the last several years.
I couldn't agree with you more. And, as a matter of fact, we're working on a whole rethinking education kind of article and a lot of complementary pieces for that. I agree that we cannot go back to the way it used to be, and we shouldn't go back to the way it used to be. And this is the opportunity we should seize to really think about the better way to educate our children. And to your point, Anders, the better way to involve parents in the education of children. I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation. And I know our audience is too, because they're so concentrated on the conversation, they're not putting questions in. So this is your last chance to get your questions in. And if we're answering all your questions, that's amazing. I'm really thrilled that we're able to do that for you today. It's always wonderful to hear different perspectives from around the nation, especially when we're trying to come up with new ways of thinking. So our final topic is, as you can tell, there's tremendous synergy between the work that we're doing in schools and the support of our industry partners, especially Securely. So this conversation is going to focus on that synergy, and we're going to have our district leaders start and talk about how they benefited from such partnerships. We're going to twist it around a little bit. We're going to hear from Chantel first, and then we're going to hear from Mark on insights, and then Anders and Jarrett after they kind of share. I'd love for you to reflect on what you think the benefit is to an industry partner to have that kind of relationship with a district. So Chantel.
Awesome. Yes, I think that's been key for us surviving the pandemic, the quarantine, remote learning, and then opening back up, is that we have in place, I've helped put in place along with my team and other district leaders, partners we can trust, partners that we've worked with. We're not jumping on every bandwagon of every free tool, although it's so gracious of all those vendors out there to make things available. Things are well thought through, and we've been a Securely customer for several years now. And as I said in the opening, it's wonderful to know that whether my students are here or whether they're at home, they're receiving that same across the board high quality filtering, and we're keeping them safe. I belong to a listserv of technology directors and CTOs in Indiana, and at least once a month, our listserv blows up with, we use such and such content filter and our kids are getting to these sites by doing this. And every single time I check those and make sure that our students aren't getting to whatever site is the site of the month. And every time, without fail, Securely is already blocking those sites. So I feel like we have top-notch filtering in place. And then just having the availability of that parent portal to kind of give parents that hand to see what's going on was a key piece for us, as well as Securely Classroom. We were really early adopters of kind of the beta of that, and our teachers had been kind of begging us for some sort of measure of control, and it was a wonderful solution that, as a former educator myself, the original initial Securely Classroom gave teachers the option to set stricter filters for their time period, or they were able to just kind of see where their students were going if they set an open session. But those teachers weren't tied to the screen. They weren't looking right there to see, oh, well, is Johnny doing what he's supposed to be doing? And it kind of gave them that back and forth measure of control. And then we had teachers using those functions during our remote learning in the spring. So as a former educator who's now an administrator, I thought that was an awesome happy medium to give our teachers a measure of control, but also make sure that they're focused on the students at hand rather than at screens, communication, and being present.
Perfect. Okay, Mark, give us your...
I touched on this earlier, and it's a pretty simple answer for me. School districts are just not equipped for heavy lifting in some aspects. And while, social emotional needs of our students, student harm, we have we have personnel in our schools that are trained to identify behaviors and intervene with students, but we don't have 24-hour-a-day staff. We don't have, quite honestly, the mindset of putting people through this day in and day out. And I'm just going to go ahead and say I feel for those people at Securely that do. That can't be an easy job. That can't be an easy job at all. And for us to be able to leverage a company, it's well worth it to us on any number of fronts. Securely is just one of them that a school district often leverages as a strategic partner. But in this case, it's incredibly beneficial just because we can activate our plan that we have in place for when an alert comes based on the monitoring that Securely is doing for us. And again, it's just something that we cannot do on our own. And it's just vital that we have those strategic partnerships in place to help us protect our students and our families.
Yeah, I felt that way when I was in district. I could not have done the work that I did without a really good strategic partner from the industry. And they get to see it from all around the country, and I get to benefit from that. So, Anders, Jarrett, do you have, is it worth partnering with us?
Yeah. No, thank you. I would say, to add to that, one of the things that benefits, Securely specifically is by having partnerships with schools is we know what to develop next, right? And I've been there. In other companies, right, where you spend all this time developing a feature and then you go to the school districts and say, what do you mean this isn't what you wanted? You're not going to use this, So, being able to have partnerships and getting the feedback, I think we keep our ear to the ground to what our partners and which are our districts, what they're saying that they need and want and the challenges they're running into. And then we can go back and bring solutions to them and get that feedback before we spend lots of development cycles and so forth to write the product. And so that the parental integration is a big example of that. We brought the idea to the market, and we had a lot of schools say, wow, that's interesting, but what about these 10 concerns and questions? And so we kept working with partners and keeping that feedback loop really close so that we could know what to develop, so that we knew when we went to the schools we were actually helping them. And it feels very good as a vendor to have a school district come to you and say you're helping provide a great impact on student safety. So that provides a lot of joy as well. But I think that feedback is the biggest thing, right? You have to be focused on the K-12 school district needs and their unique challenges, which are very different from other markets. And having schools that can give you that feedback, I think, is absolutely essential.
And I want to second that as well, because I'm on the product development side. So it is essential for product development to both have those partnerships with schools, and just it's great to work for a company that provides the resources to us who are on the product side to allow us to both have the contact and the partnerships with the schools, but also the development resources to make it happen and to put those into action quickly. Obviously, we're in a very unusual time now with things changing rapidly in schools. So as a product manager, to be able to respond very quickly and meet those needs and have the resources to do that is just very exciting.
And not every industry partner feels that way. So on behalf of all the districts you work with, I want to say thank you for taking that viewpoint and for kind of being a listening partner as well as a strategic partner. So we've come to the end of our time, and it passed very, very fast. And we've answered all the questions because our amazing audience didn't have any. So I think really what we've learned today is there's a tremendous amount of unknowns. There's a tremendous amount of kind of planning and rapid fire motion. And there's a tremendous benefit to having a really great partner in the thinking process as you're trying to kind of uncover what your plan is going to be and prepare for all of the unknowns that are going to be looming out there. So thanks so much for being with us today and being part of this conversation. I hope you've appreciated it and enjoyed it as much as I have. Thank you again to our panelists, and thanks so much to Securely for making our time together even possible today. I thoroughly enjoy my time with you each Wednesday during our virtual Lunch and Learns, and I really appreciate my partnership with Tech and Learning. We have a lot of ideas about supporting districts and schools as we move forward in this new normal. So please check back on the Tech and Learning websites. Don't forget those rethinking articles that are going to be coming out soon. And check the K20 Connect website too for more information about future opportunities to come together as an education community. We love you all. We look forward to seeing you again soon, hopefully in person eventually. Until then, be safe, be well, and let's stay connected. Have a great week, everyone. And if you're starting back to school, be safe. We miss you. Bye-bye.